Hi, I'm Greg Ullin with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today I get an in-studio guest, which is always the most fun. I get to sit down with Mike Hanna, founder and CEO of TrueSpot. Mike, thanks so much for making the trip to Dayton and joining me.
A pleasure. I love the studio. It's excited to be here.
No, thanks. Appreciate it. It's one that we're proud of. The team did a really, really good job with it. It was a fun one because they visualized it and printed it out and then went and built it. I was amazed how close the table was to the rendering that they drew up.
The rendering looks just like the actual studio.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing.
Yep.
Like you can even tell, like that picture came actually before the studio existed. Like, no, it looks exactly the same. So, yeah, great job.
No, appreciate it. Yeah, it's a great team that we have that, it's a fun project, but they did a good job finding everything. So, so Mike, this is your second time on the podcast.
Yes,
obviously.
a repeat guest. I love it. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you could make it back. Last time, we were on, talked about your experience. We started talking about your experience in telecom, right?
Yes.
And how that kind of translated over into location services and automotive. And you've had some other experiences throughout, obviously, your career too. And before we hopped on and started recording, I was just doing a little background, and I came across this company that I'm really interested in talking to you about.
Yeah.
Because it's exploded now, but it seems like it was way ahead of its time then. It's this company called Spiff City. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things and it was well ahead of its time. It's like, perseverance is a key attribute. So maybe we should have stayed with, Spiff City way back when. But yeah, the interesting thing about it was in the early days of Facebook and something called Foursquare, which is still around, but that was kind of your first kind of mobile check-in to a physical location. So if you had a restaurant or a facility, you could check in and people within your circle would see that. And so you're kind of influencing from that perspective. And then likes and everything you do on Facebook, and you had Twitter, and you had all these things going. I'm like, so it's actually a paradigm shift of we, the people, are being monetized. We're the content.
Right.
And so with that, if you just think of the typical ad model from a TV perspective and content you advertise through commercials and these sort of things, like we are actually the content, so we should be compensated for that. And so Spiff City was a way to actually create that compensation model for the user. So you're doing all the same social media stuff you're doing, and we integrated with like Foursquare at the time and Facebook and those sort of things, pulling that together. And so if you checked in somewhere, then that would be pushed out to your network, and then you would be the first influencer. So if you had friends and family or connected associates that didn't showed up at that restaurant, let's say, then you would get spiffed for that. And so it was kind of a piggy bank sort of model. You would start to create this kind of spiff currency. And then we gave it back to like the restaurants, for example, and gift cards. And so everything was monetized, not through cash, but through gift cards, through whatever. And so we built out the concept and had a couple of things going and just got busy. And,
sure.
And then it's like, okay, it was too early. And so it just didn't have the perseverance to probably stick with it and push it to the next level. But it was way back in the back of the deep recesses of cobwebs and things that haven't thought about in a while. So yeah, great research.
Yeah, no, but influencer marketing is becoming such a big deal. And honestly, even with dealers, some of the larger dealers are leveraging opportunities in a lot of instances, I'm seeing at least locally and then in other places in the country, college athletes, right? So with NIL being a thing now and college athletes being able to be compensated for appearances and things like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting just to see the evolution of what was no influencer marketing, right? And there's no value, or I shouldn't say value, there was no compensation there.
Correct, yeah.
To now it's like anybody can get compensated, it seems like.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've thought about it from time to time, not my deep area of expertise, but college athletes not being able to take endorsements and do all that sort of thing.
Right.
I was kind of the same model, the value they're creating for the university and the NCAA and, in this case, those sort of things. There should be, even though they're young and they're getting scholarships, they're effectively not getting paid to play, but they're getting a full ride playing football and have a chance to go pro. But it's such a small number of athletes that actually make it pro and actually can build a career out of it.
Sure.
But then in college, you got a much bigger base, and there's just so much money being made in the system. I think it's a fair, I don't know all the details and ins and outs of all the compensation models, but I think it's fair that college athletes get compensated. So I'm glad to see that in a lot of ways kind of transpire over the last few years. But
yeah, and it's opened the doors to athletes beyond football and men's basketball too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like historically, that was where any money was going to be.
Yeah.
But you look at some of the highest paid college athletes in today's world, and you have gymnasts, like female gymnasts. You have women's basketball players. You have all of these different types of athletes and these different types of people. So but it is interesting, especially at the local level, when you get down to just thinking about a dealership's marketing strategy, right? Mm-hmm. And you have sort of these regional or even community treasures in basketball teams sometimes, or in football teams.
Yeah.
Like we're in Dayton, so Dayton, Ohio has Deron Holmes III, and nationwide, it's probably not one of those names where everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that guy."
Yeah.
Right. But in Dayton, he's a pretty big deal. He's a good ball player.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, and I think you can get super hyper local, and I think communities just from that perspective, I think that's key, and in being able to have whether it's athletes or others within the community be able to be a part of that, and I think recognize the value of that, not at necessarily national or whatever, but at a local level, I think is huge.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I mean, you went to Texas, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you guys have the king of NIL deals right now, Quinn Ewers.
Yes.
He was the Buckeyes quarterback, and then
he was a Texas quarterback, but then he went to Ohio State, but then he came back. Yeah. Right. So came back home. I get him for one more year, so we're excited.
Yeah. Should be good. Should be good. You mentioned something when you were just describing Spiff City, and it triggered something in my memory too. So you mentioned gift cards. So instead of direct payments or cash, kind of using gift cards as the currency.
Yeah.
Why gift cards? And I ask because I have some preconceived notions, but I'm curious.
Yeah. So a couple things. I think I know your preconceived notions because gift cards get bought and they get put in drawers and not used, and there's I think billions of dollars out there of unspent gift cards. But our model was the places people were going. We're very much kind of the physical world, so it wasn't so much influencer marketing as far as like content you're creating, but it's like, hey, I'm going to these places, I'm going to these restaurants, I'm going to these bars, I'm going to this gym or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the thing. And how do you give back to the people, and you compensate them with actual gift cards to those places? And so you could, a couple different reasons. One, you could buy the gift cards at a discount, acquire them for because it's part of a promotional aspect. And so, hey, it's a $50 gift card, but you paid $25 to the restaurant to actually use it because they want the traffic and people coming. So it was a way to increase the compensation model back to the participants in the Spiff City kind of cloud as such. So that's the reason we did it. So again, it was kind of a community thing as well. So everything was kind of localized. So if it was Atlanta or Dallas, you're working with the local restaurants and community where people would go and gather and have fun, work, live, play. So that was kind of kind of a circular kind of value model was the idea.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And the buying at a discount is really, you're lowering costs. Yeah. That's what you're doing, right? Yeah. So you have, in a way, you have a way to lower costs and keep it a little bit more under control. Whereas if you're paying cash or you're paying, direct to the individual or to the business or whatever it was, it kind of eliminates that. So
yeah, absolutely.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so sorry to get started off on some random tangent, but it really was interesting to me. And
very interesting you found that. Yeah, it's cool to talk about. It's been a long time.
Good. So one of the other things, Mike, I wanted to pick your brain on. So you've you started TrueSpot 7 years ago. Is that right? 8 years ago?
Probably 7 years. Yeah.
7 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So you built it from nothing, right? You're an entrepreneur. It's like, I have an idea. We're going to go do this thing.
Yep.
So with that, you had to build a team around you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there, whether it's people in automotive, even outside of automotive, but I think about a dealer, right? And they're opening a store.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a new point, or maybe it's an acquired store, or maybe it's somebody just getting started out. In any case, you have to build a team to run the store, right? So from your perspective, and this doesn't have to be specific to dealerships or anything like that. Obviously, I'd like to hear your experience on how you built out your leadership team as a startup and kind of what that process looked like and where it went from when you started to kind of where you are now. My guess is it's there's a lot of little bumps in the road. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Some little bumps, some big bumps. I think there's some luck involved. Right time, right place, just right network and relationships. And sometimes it's a certain person at a certain time is transitioning and like, hey, having coffee, like, are you busy? I guess. And so, but I think in the early days as a startup, like we were a nights and weekends sort of thing. And so it was pulling people that I knew that had specific skill sets. And luckily, a lot of just technology people in the early days. And so it's some unique development skills, especially coming out of telecom, like Ericsson and Nokia, and kind of legacy. Hey, we know how to build wireless networks and build network operation centers to monitor these things, and then build software. So you're kind of pulling different kind of resource groups together. So that wasn't so much the management team, though some of that did evolve to management. And over time, I think the key thing, at least for me, is the network of people. And so as you get older, you just know more people and interact. And so there was really a good bank of really good people that had certain skill sets or certain capabilities and would fit different roles. And as a really early stage company, sometimes you don't know what you need until you have it, and you're like, okay, that actually works pretty well. Probably not giving a lot of value and kind of specific, hey, these are the lessons learned. But I think it's just one of those things that's, it's very hands-on. You're always evaluating, you're always evolving, trying to figure out what can work better, especially, again, as a startup, like everybody's wearing multiple hats. And so you gotta have people that, one can do certain things really well because you have a lot of technical expertise in that, but you also have people that can be a little bit schizophrenic. Like one day we're doing this, next day we're doing that, next day we're doing that, and then all the other stuff you can't drop. This new thing is super important too. So I think it's a little bit of a learning process, and as we get older, I think we get more experience and then more people to draw from to pull into certain roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. So in today's world, you got your feet under you, companies growing, doing great, in two different industries, right? You're in automotive, you're in healthcare, really taking off. So you have a leadership team that's fairly well organized, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
And pretty broad. You have a CRO, a CMO, a CFO. You have kind of your C-suite around you.
Yes.
Where did you start? So it's not like you went out and hired 7 people to work with, right? I mean, it was, I would imagine, it was a little bit of a, hey, do you want to come? And then, okay, you're going to be my CFO.
Yes.
And do you, like, how did that go? Where did you start, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, that was pretty much it. So I again, knew a lot of great people with certain skill sets. And so a lot of it early on was, hey, I need some help. A CMO was a friend of mine, worked with him at Nokia, and he was a dynamic guy, also started a beer company and just different things. And so I need help in marketing. And he's like, I got some cycles. Let's figure this out. And so we just started working together, putting things together. My chief revenue officer was a friend of mine. Our kids go to school together. And he had started a company before, was doing well, and went off and did some high-tech CRO type role, and just left that company. We're sitting down for coffee, and I'm like, what are you up to today? And he's like, well, kind of leaving this. And I was like, okay, let me talk to you more about TrueSpot. As a friend, we never really talked business. And so we got into it. He's like, this is super interesting. All right, count me in. And so, and then from kind of that building of the team, and CFO was one of our early lead investors. Just had CPA, CFO experience, and it's like, hey, come aboard and take this role and responsibility and help us build the company. And so we got a lot of luck. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think good people around at the right time, and just always just trying to find kind of the best fit and match. And we can always keep improving, but I think we have a really good team, to your point, and super excited about kind of what we're building next. So
yeah. No, that's great. That's great, and it's always interesting, right? When you got to have, it's the chicken or the egg, right? When you're thinking about growing, and I mean, if you're going to bring somebody on, you got to pay them.
Yeah,
right?
They have to work cheap too. That was the other requirement. Yeah, so
well, yeah, and how you structure things. I mean, that can play into it, obviously, but cash outlay up front can't be massive. I would assume,
absolutely,
right? Because you got it's growth or people or both. Like, how do you balance it?
Yes,
that can be really difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean that's exactly it. So it was a lot of a little bit of fortune, and everybody could take a little bit. Even today, everybody on the team would say they're underpaid market rates and this and that, and so self-included. So that's just part of it. So we're still growing, and so we don't have a lot of cash to still outlay, and so we're really focused on being lean and efficient and growth, and really kind of look forward to the next steps. And so everybody got to take a little bit less than what you probably would somewhere else. So.
Well, when it's fun and you're working on something you love, though, I mean,
True.
It all pans out in the end,
Yeah.
right? And something you believe in. I mean, you guys are doing great things, so I'm sure your team feels that this is a part of something that's going to grow and grow
Absolutely.
and grow.
Yeah, there's a ton of excitement. There's every day is a new adventure. We're working on some really good things. Super exciting. Our partnership with Reynolds, crazy exciting. Just all the things, and just with some of the team today. What are the things that we can do? And so there's always a crawl, walk, run. And so, but those things in mind, everybody sees where the run can be at.
Yeah.
We just have to keep chopping wood, because there's a lot of crawling we got to do to get to some of these areas we can start to walk and then run. And so that's fantastic. And, some of the things we've been able to do with KeyTrack so far, and it's really just the tip of the iceberg. And there's several other things that we have cooking. Our health business, you mentioned, is just in its infancy, but we see huge growth opportunity and just better product fit and price point than anything else in the market. So there's no lack of exciting things to do, which is really good. So. Yeah.
When you figure out how to map out the healthcare industry, you'll have to come back on and share with the world
Yes.
what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I don't know. It's a whole new language. I'd like to say, as I speak automotive, I speak tech, telecom and wireless, and health was a whole new language, and it's a whole new acronym sheet, and just the whole model of how things work. And so I'm not saying I have it all figured out. I've now just been able to actually probably have a conversation with health tech professionals or health professionals, and know enough not to be completely in the dark. So
yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, it's a very unique space, and it's really broad, right? You think about automotive, and automotive is so broad, and there's so many ways that dealerships add value, and their operations are so broad that it's really impressive. And you can learn so much every single day. Yeah, and then you go to a hospital, and it's just like there's all these other layers of complexity there. So I'm sure it's one that you'll never know completely.
Yeah, where the end is. We one of the kind of interesting points there. So even in automotive, because we're location services, location intelligence, and so variable ops and reconditioning and fixed ops. And then there's like big trucks, collision centers. And so all of these are areas we're like really new in and learning, but it's still part of automotive to a certain extent, but very adjunct or just ancillary. And it's like a whole other market. And it's like, oh, we can take and apply. And so it's like you can reuse a little bit of from the language capabilities and the product. And then there's some new stuff too. So it's even in automotive, like, which is huge, to your point, there's even like complementary industries like right next to it that we're super excited about too. But
yeah, marine, RV, all those types of things.
Yeah.
No, that's great. No, a lot of fun. So you, Mike, you sold cars in college, right?
Yes.
Okay. Was that kind of like your first 2 years in school?
Yeah. So the car. So I had kind of a few jobs in college. Waited tables. Worked at MCI, so long distance, and then I took a semester off. It was about 7 months, and then sold cars. And that was, quite honestly, probably the most valuable experience. I think, from a business perspective, from just being sales day to day and just everything around it. So worked at a dealership in Dallas-Fort Worth area called Riley Honda. Still there today, yeah. They get a great catchy theme song, still around. But just jumped in and just learned everything. So I was a very quick learner and just loved the experience and loved sales and making really good money. And so it was one of those, like, it was a somewhat interesting story. Like I knew I was taking a semester off, didn't necessarily tell my GM and GSM that. I kind of found out like a month or so before I was going back to school. It was funny. It was Thanksgiving. And so that morning, just on the Saturday, we all rallied in the sales room and had the rah-rah, and everybody got like a $50 gift card to the grocery store for Thanksgiving turkey. It's like, oh, fantastic. And my GSM called me, and about an hour later, it's like, hey, you're going back to school. It's like, yeah, about 4 or 5 weeks, the semester starts, and I haven't given notice yet. And he's like, okay, well, it's time to leave. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, give us back the gift card too. I was like, it's like, okay, that's the car business, right? So, but it just an interesting experience. Loved the time. Still have friends that I worked with at Lute Riley Honda like decades ago, but didn't use that experience because not a lot had changed just from operational perspective. Tons have changed, but a lot of the basics hadn't. Cars and keys were still hard to find, and there were tons of opportunity to improve on that. And so that was one of the key things that just drew from that experience, even though it was short. 6 months at a car dealership's like 2 years in the real world. So it was like, yeah, a ton of great experience. So
yeah, no, that's good. And then obviously you went on to quite a career in telecom. Yeah. Lots of different roles, a couple different big companies, right, and access to a lot of cutting edge technology. Yes. So what brought you back then? So you said cars and keys were hard to find, but it's 6 months worth of experience. And maybe it was so much fun you couldn't get it out of your blood. I don't know, but
it was time.
Was that, and then having the knowledge that you gained from your experience in telecom, combined with knowing that problem in a dealership, did that come to you naturally, I guess, or were you searching for something to do? Like, what was the genesis of you going, you know what, there's a company here?
Yeah, it's a great question. You mentioned Spiff City, and had a couple other startups that all reached kind of certain levels of capability, but I never really pushed them all the way through. Like Spiff City, we got to a point like, hey, we think this is great, and just never went out and capitalized and raised the money we needed and did something else coming out of college. And looking back on those, I was like, yeah, we're ahead of our time. If we were a little bit more perseverant, we could have actually taken this to the next level. And you just learn. Like out of college, I didn't know anything about running a business, and I started a technology company building websites, and we started doing that. We started working with doctors' offices, and we started building forums, and actually built some really cool stuff. And just so many other things going on. Just never stopped and said, okay, we could build this into something really great. And so through those moments of not following through were kind of my lessons learned. I said, okay, the background from a technology perspective, and I see you're a Cubs fan with baseball, but so I had inside baseball and the technology. And so I knew we could solve problems that the companies I'd worked for, and Ericsson and Nokia specifically in this case, actually invented the core raw technology. And it was all about how do you find the use case in the application to turn it into something at a user level. And so with that in mind, knowing that technology and knowing and having access to really good guys that knew that stuff as well, I said, okay, we're going to build this, and we're going to make sure we figure it out through all the trials and tribulations and just keep going. So that was when I started it. It was like, all right, we're not stopping for any reason. The opportunity's here. We can do something really unique. So we just have to figure out a way to just make it happen. And luckily, through different parts of the team that are stuck it out, and not always again highest pay, they could go do something else, but no, they're in it because it's exciting and there's something we're building through our investment partners and that sort of thing. Just said, hey, there's something here. Let's keep building this. And so that's probably took off a couple tangents there, but yeah.
So how long was it from when you had the idea and you said, you know what, we're going to do this, to customer number one? Like how much time elapsed?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there were a couple evolutions in the early days.
As there usually are, I suppose. So that's good, yeah.
So when I started out, so cars and keys was a problem, but also the consumer experience. I was like dead set on how do we turn the retail automotive experience into something really great? How do we digitize it? And a lot of the early days, a lot like with Spiff City, it was a bit of a paradigm shift with social media, people being able to check in, use their mobile device for kind of real-time anywhere communication, that sort of thing. I was like, hey, the same thing applies to retail automotive, any retail experience really. And so if we could take and digitize the experience for a consumer, they could walk into a dealership, we could skin an experience for the user in real time. We could know where all the inventory's at. And so what cars are you looking for? What sort of, are you looking for pre-owned? Are you looking for this price band? Are you looking for something rugged? So you kind of know all of that through the online experience, and really kind of the early focus was online to on-lot. How do you transition that? How do you bring traffic into the dealer? And how do you actually make that consumer, actually the salespeople at the dealership, already understanding of what that consumer is coming in to do? And so there was some really cool stuff we had built on the consumer experience side. Is that customer comes onto the lot, they have to have an app, but they know where the cars are that they're looking at because we can physically locate the cars.
Sure.
And so through that, they could interact with the sales team just digitally through the app. Maybe they don't want somebody to come talk to them. Like you see the app, and a lot of times you just want to browse. You could actually have a setting set. Hey, but now you want to test drive the car. Then click a button. So click to test drive, and then a notification would go to somebody on the sales team, and then they come out with the key already known because we know where the key's at. We know what car you're looking at, and so we're already coming to you with the key and the service, and then talking about that vehicle prepared to talk about. So we thought there was a ton of really cool engagement features and things. So we started building that out. And then interestingly, and we had a couple dealerships on the early version of it, actually a handful, loved it too. It was one of those like, hey, this thing is going to be the next best thing since sliced bread. And then some of our bigger dealerships were like, but you have this car and key location thing. Why don't you just stop there? just keep doing that. Just make that better. Because and this is pre-COVID. So a lot of dealerships were, hey, the digital consumer experience we have. We got our sales team here. This is the way we do it. It's putting something between that we're not quite sure about, but that car key location, just go back to that. So we kept getting kind of pushed in that direction. And we said, okay, great. Then let's continue to build that out, and let's focus on operations at the dealership. Really, our early customers were pushing us in that direction. And then COVID happened, and everybody wanted a digital, hands-free, no-touch kind of experience. And I was like, oh, man, can we pull that thing off out of mothballs? And it was too far gone. We had already pivoted and really gone all in on the campus network and really upped our game as far as the location services piece.
Yeah.
But I mean, so that was kind of the transition and the pivot from consumer experience that had location and this interaction capability to location, and how do we operationalize that for variable ops, reconditioning, and fixed ops to create kind of a new level of service and capability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. That's an interesting kind of path and story.
Yeah.
I also, it seems like there's a theme there that I've heard over and over and over again. And so often we see products get started or companies get started really focused and with the best intentions in mind and a great idea on the consumer experience. Yeah. Right. But often it's predicated on the consumer knowing what to do. Yeah. Right. And by nature, they don't. Right. We, as a consumer, you buy a car once, at best, probably you're there once every other year. Right. If you're on a short-term lease. But for a majority of people, I mean, average age of a vehicle right now is what, 12 years or something. Right. So, every 5 years, 6 years, 7 years or more. And when you look at loan terms with rates and just vehicle prices, that number is just going to keep growing. Right. Yeah. So it's not a transaction or an interaction that happens frequently. So as the consumer, we don't know what we want. We don't know what we're supposed to do. We don't. The process isn't second nature to us, right? So I see it a lot where there's these great ideas, and what you just described is like, wow, that's awesome. Yeah. But as the consumer, if I don't know what to do, it almost needs to be driven by the dealership. Yeah. So it can be focused on the consumer experience, but how do you put the power in the dealership's hands?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was actually the trick to what we were doing early on. Was it needed to be you had to have a physical application, which is always tough, and downloading apps and this and that. And so we came at it and said, okay, we can build an app that actually reskins itself at the dealership level. So I had a couple of kind of tricks to it. One is if I'm Classic Chevrolet. Okay, fine. You want your own app? Hey, the app downloaded could be skinned to Classic Chevrolet. That could be the home screen. That could be the inventory. You have the service hours. You have all that, because that's a big part of it as well. That app experience is not just buying; it's the service, and then you go through the cycle of buying every 3, 5, 7 years, whatever. Sure. And so I had a couple tricks to it. One was that. The second was if I'm just a shopper. As I went from dealership to dealership, the app would actually reskin itself. And so it would rebrand, it would reload, it would load the inventory of whatever dealership you were at. So physically changing from dealership to dealership. So we're kind of a little bit ahead of our time. So we could just do that through geofence and all the integrations and that sort of thing. So at the consumer level, we kind of had a double pitch. One at the dealer, hey, it's your experience, it's your brand. Everything changes when the customer is at your dealership. And if they are a customer of your dealership, we can default it to be your dealer. Yeah. But if they do go show up and go from a Chevrolet store to the Ford store next door, it will reskin itself only at the Ford store. So that was kind of how we did it, because the dealers wanted to own the experience. We said, we're just going to enable that experience, and then you can own it. And then to make it a broad appeal, then there had to be more than just your dealer. So there were a couple ways we did that. So it was always a very interesting part of the discussion sort of deal. We thought we had the nut cracked, but yeah.
So you've iterated a lot over the years, and it sounds like a lot of that's been driven by partners that you've had that are dealers, right? Yeah. So you have customers, and they say, hey, make this better, do this. And so you've been really, it sounds like, great and probably fortunate, you'd say, to work with kind of well thought out dealers that are a little progressive and can provide feedback. So I'm curious, over that time frame, 7 years, or maybe it's the last 2 years, whatever it is. What are some of the use cases that you've seen for TrueSpot that you're like, I didn't design it for that, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been quite a few through the years, and that's been the fun part. So, and I love being at the dealership, and I love our dealer partners. Sometimes things aren't going well, and sometimes they're going great. And I think sometimes there's a tendency, well, maybe not with dealers, but I was going to say a tendency sometimes to tell you all the good things. And so I hear that a lot. But I always say, hey, tell me good things, great, but I want to hear the one or two things that we can improve on that are not working, because that's the only way we get better. And so through that experience, I think helps us just find and iterate and evolve. So the use cases, there's so many interesting ones. Some of them feel kind of the early ones that we did. I'll tell you a really quick one, just as a quick story. So we track cars and keys, obviously. Sure. The keys get lost, and they get lost in the darndest places. So it could be in a pocket, could be behind a filing cabinet, could be hidden in a desk drawer, whatever the case is. So one of our early dealers, a large Mercedes-Benz store in Dallas-Fort Worth, they had like 20 keys in total. I think it was like 7 reconditioning cars. Okay. And they had both sets of keys. And anyway, they got all rolled up by the third-party reconditioning company and papers and stuff. And they got put into the trash. And I'll never forget this, like 4 or 5 years ago, super early on. And we got a call from the dealer, and the dealer says, "Hey, something's wrong with the TrueSpot system. It's showing a bunch of keys, and they're out in a dumpster." And my reaction was, maybe the keys are in the dumpster. And so it can't be. That can't be. And so luckily, it was we're based in Dallas, and so we were close enough to go to the dealership and just say, okay. And anyway, the keys were in the dumpster, so it was super interesting. Big dumpster full of trash and kind of overflowing. Luckily, the garbage truck hadn't come to empty it. And then so now we know the keys are in the dumpster. The system says that. We confirm they're there, and like, oh, there's all this trash. How are we getting these keys are lost? So like, oh, but we have this really cool kind of proximity feature. We call MODAR, stands for mobile radar. It's like, okay, just start pulling out the trash bags and just use the mobile app and just through this hot cold experience, you'll see which one. So literally within, I don't know, maybe it was 2 minutes by the time we pulled the trash bags out, and there's the whole dealership. This is like, I don't know, $7,000 worth of keys, and there's a whole. And you got Highline vehicles that you have to recut all these keys, obviously the cost, but then you have the time delay, and they're trying to get these things frontline ready. So there's $10,000 sitting on, do we find these keys easily in the next few minutes? Anyway, so very quickly, within 2 minutes, okay, they're in this trash bag, open up the trash bag, and like 15 to 20 keys just rolled out. And so it was like, we'll use TrueSpot forever. And so that was an interesting use case. Keys everywhere from and salesperson spot. This was one that is a similar use case on the key side. You get a lot of times you got a really hot lead coming at 2:00, coming for that. Use the Mercedes-Benz, that SL. You park that particular car in the back so nobody sees it. Out of sight, out of mind. You take the keys, you hide them in your desk, and then you have another customer that comes in at 11. That's with another salesperson that wants to buy that car. Well, that would be problematic. You can't find it. Nobody knows where it's at. So TrueSpot, and this is a true story from the dealership. Tell me the story today is that, okay, where's that car? We get somebody here to buy it. Oh, the car's back in employee parking, and the key's in, I'll just make up the name, in Johnny's desk. Or is it showing in Johnny's desk? So you go, Johnny, using that same MODAR mode, hey, Johnny doesn't have the keys. Literally, this is the story. Like, I don't have the keys. I haven't seen that car. And so, well, really, the TrueSpot system says it's at the keys at your desk, and then they go into the MODAR mode, and there's this sound visual, and it's like, they're actually are they in your pocket? And Johnny has to turn over the keys, and so good or
Johnny
bad.
had to give back his gift card with those keys too. From
I think Johnny was a bit reprimanded, but so really cool use cases for keys getting lost in all kinds of places. We had a dealer partner find a key on the highway that rolled off the top of a car.
Wow.
And so those never stop. Key owner of one of the dealerships took a key home. They look it up, and our app can locate to the house, sort of thing. And so, okay, the owner took another key home, and we can't sell that car. So he brings the key back. But more specifically on the operations side, some of the things that you can do that I get super excited about, because we're all about, there's so many ways to save money, increase efficiency, increase customer satisfaction, and increase employee satisfaction. So if you can do your job better, faster, you're not looking for keys. I'm in Texas, it gets hot in the summer.
Yeah.
If you can save steps outside, trying to find a car, pulling it up for a test drive for a customer. I mean, the CSI scores alone just for keeping me out of the Texas heat for an extra 5 minutes is huge in Texas summer. But getting to the operational aspects of it, because the way I describe it, we call it geointelligence, and we can do location better than anybody. Like, we built a system, we have a bunch of patents, and we've taken it into healthcare, and we take it into other, like the location capabilities, what we call AccuFind, our location platform, we think are unmatched. But when you really start to apply the location to the operations and workflow at a dealership, which we know really well, and then kind of this geospatial analysis, we call it. So certain work just happens in certain places. So if you start to correlate that all together, and from a business intelligence or even your recon workflow tool that, hey, these things should be happening. What are the exceptions to the rule? Well, location can show you exceptions all the time. It's always working. It's always looking. It's always understanding where cars and keys are at. And if a car is not in a certain area that, say, it's paint and body and it's supposed to be there, and that's the next step,
right,
and it's been sitting in just a holding area for a day or two, but hey, paint and body is fine. They have capacity. Why is this car here? Those can be real-time alerts. So our cars are kind of similar example, parts waiting. And so the parts have come in. So you can match those two things really quickly in the system. We do tons of integration. We have a Power BI team, so we're always looking at business intelligence and analytics and creating reports and alerts and exceptions to these things. And because there's so much, and dealerships are so busy, you have so many cars, whether it's through service, going through recon, that you're selling on the front line.
Right.
And so how do you just keep track? And dealers tell me this all the time, and it's what we really focused on early, was don't tell me all the stuff that's working. alert me to the exceptions. And there's 3 or 4 exceptions every single day that if I know what those are, it's going to save me $1,000 a day or $2,000 a day. And so those are the things that we really look for from a use case, whether it's workflow related, if a key's in the wrong spot, they're outside at closing or whatever, they need to be inside in the key track machine, et cetera. We want to alert to those things and create an opportunity for dealers to either get those automatically through alerts or just visually through a digitized dealership experience, the dashboard, say, hey, there's the 3 or 4 things that are out of the normal that your attention should be focused on. So there's tons of use cases, and we find more and more every day. So
no, good stories for sure. But what you just said there really stuck with me, and I hope it does with everybody else too. And I'm sure it will. Is really just managing the exceptions, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to recreate the wheel every day.
Correct,
right? You have a process in place. It works.
Yeah.
What you need to look out for are the ones that are outside of that normal process.
Absolutely right.
And if you can manage those, everything gets back on track.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting kind of simplified way to look at it, where it's just this is another mechanism to help you identify those exceptions, right? Because you're going to manage the exceptions, find them, right? You got to find the exceptions, which is exactly what you're kind of describing. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's good. All right. Well, Mike, this has been fun. What else haven't we talked about that you want to? Anything else we haven't touched on that you want to?
We talked a little bit about Texas football.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Be here before you know it. Spring game's probably coming up soon. And
yes. Yeah, we're super excited about that. Actually, on that, just a random thing. So I'm a Longhorn alum, and so Texas has something called the Longhorn 100. So it looks at the fastest growing companies either founded or ran by Texas alum, and so we got selected. So we're going to a gala. I'm not sure. I think we're in the top 20%. I don't know if we'll be number 1 or not, but so there's 100 companies that'll be there. So just interesting from an alma mater perspective to see where we fall. But so we'll have a gala, I think, in May in Austin. So super excited about that.
Well, congratulations. That is fun.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, it was a good year last year for Texas, so we'll see what happens coming up.
Yeah, very much so.
Good. Well, Mike, thanks again for stopping by, coming in to be in person. It's always a little more fun that way.
Yeah.
But best of luck, and look forward to the future partnership, kind of moving forward with TrueSpot.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rick. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah.
In-studio guests are always so much fun, and that was no exception. Mike Hanna is great. Really appreciate him sitting down and talking with me. Went a little all over the place today, but I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. Before we hop off, don't forget, you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. And make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.